Hello, and welcome to Interfaith Insights, Spotlight on Faith. And today I have a very extra special guest today. The Cabinet Secretary for Justice, Mr. Humza Yousaf, joins us. Welcome.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
No, it's great that you can give up some time for us today. And just to give some short introduction to Humza, in many ways he's been a very groundbreaking politician. In 2016, he became the first ethnic minority to win a constituency seat in the Scottish Parliament. He was the first non-white and first Muslim member of the Scottish Government when he was appointed as a minister in 2012. At age 27, he was the youngest minister ever appointed to the Scottish Cabinet. Scottish Government, it's great. Became Scotland's first ethnic minority and first Muslim cabinet minister when appointed as Cabinet Secretary for Justice in 2018. Appointed at age 33, he also became the youngest person ever to hold a cabinet position in the Scottish Government. That's maybe, I don't know if that's changed since, but that was also quite impressive.
Forbes has stolen my title.
I was thinking she maybe is taking that. You cut your teeth working as parliamentary assistant for another great trailblazer, Bashir Ahmed, and part of his election in 2007 when he became a Muslim MSP. You're the son of immigrants who we call New Scots, I like to call them, who arrived in the UK during the 1960s. Your mum was from Kenya, interesting, and your father was from Pakistan. So you have that sense of cultural diversity. And I love that description on your Twitter of hailing from Bhangra and bagpipes. And we'll talk about how that cultural mix comes together. And you also talk about being committed to a fairer Scotland. And people will remember that cultural diversity combination from you when you took your oath in the Scottish Parliament, doing it both in English and in Urdu, and obviously dressed in the traditional Sherwani, and with the Patrick Thistle tartan t-shirt. Don't know where that came from, but so we'll touch on some of these cultural elements. So welcome. Touching on that cultural identity, you're obviously very proud of your dual Scottish and Pakistani roots. I wonder, growing up in Glasgow, did you always have that strong connection to both kind of dual identities?
Well, thanks again for the invitation, and thanks to all those that are involved in some excellent work right across the country from our faith communities. If ever you want to see the best of the human condition, I always think that it's in the worst of times that you see some of that come to the fore. So in the midst of this global pandemic, we've seen the very best of the human condition, and faith groups have often been at the front of that. So thanks so much to you and other faith groups for doing what they're doing. So the short answer to your question is no. I don't think I was always comfortable with it. I think, like many people from New Scots backgrounds, as you might describe it, I was, my mum and my dad tried really hard to get us to appreciate and understand our culture from their countries that they immigrated from. But my mum, although she's from Kenya, she's from a Pakistani background. Right. A lot of Asians were in East Africa.
Of course.
Kenya. But she's, culturally, she would describe herself as Pakistani. And interestingly, they tried their best to get us to learn the language. So learn Urdu, Punjabi, understand the culture. And, to the extent we would go to a school on a Saturday, we would learn the language as well as the faith, similar to Sunday school, obviously, but ours was on a Saturday.
Sure.
And the religious side of it, I didn't really mind. I used to do my best to skive the cultural and the language side of it as best as I could. And so we'd usually bunk off and try to skive that bit. And there's a real resistance against it. I remember always saying to my mum, why do I need to learn Urdu? Because, I live in Scotland, speak English here, don't need to learn it. And there was a real, I'm not sure where the resistance came, whether it was just a natural thing for a young person, whether it was because the school I went to was 99.9% white.
Yeah.
I'm not sure entirely where it came from, but it definitely came there. And I think once I grew older, certainly into my late teens, probably early 20s, is when I actually really regretted not knowing or understanding my culture better. And to this day, I still regret it. And so I made a really conscious effort to begin to become comfortable with the fact that actually you don't have to choose between one or the other. And 9/11 was a difficult time. I mean, 9/11, there was a lot of people who would question, are you Muslim or are you British? Which one are you? And I think for me, the fact that we didn't have so much of that in Scotland, it still happened to an extent, of course, but we didn't have so much of that in Scotland, made me think, actually, I can make peace between all the different facets of my identity.
It's interesting because a lot of people who did come here in the 60s, 70s, some people did try to, maybe as part of trying to fit in, would change their names or slightly. Yeah. It's almost like, goodness gracious me, used to make fun of how you would change it to Cooper and things like that. And there maybe was an element of, maybe I could imagine, the pressure to try and settle in and, you know, fit into the norm. And I think a lot of
for sure.
minority groups have that kind of wrestle with that.
Yeah, for sure. I used to find it really weird that so many of the Asian uncles I knew were called Tony. Why are they called Tony? And then but they used to just use that name because I think a lot of them just, one guy I know just took it because he enjoyed the movie Scarface. So he just watched, and he thought, you know, it's much easier for people to understand than Muzaffar or Abdul Rahim. So I just call myself Tony. I must have grown up with about a good 3 or 4 Tonys.
I did wonder where that came from. I know quite a few Tonys myself.
Yeah, I think fascination with Scarface. I think Scarface came out around about, you know, that kind of, I think maybe the 70s or 80s, and it kind of captured a bit of an imagination with some of those younger Asians.
Really interesting. And obviously, you have this strong calling for building a fairer Scotland, as you call it. Did you have that kind of activism thing in you at a young age? Was it something that came from a member of your family, really, that kind of inspired you to want to get involved and change things? Or how did you get in that route to politics?
I think, I mean, it definitely comes from my parents, both of them. But for them also, it comes from our faith. I mean, I'm deeply rooted in my faith, and I don't, you know, people say politicians shouldn't talk about God, but I suppose I often do, because it's impossible for me, if I'm being questioned about myself and my motivations, very, very difficult for me not to say that my faith has played a huge part in that public ethos that I've got, that service to the public. And many faiths have it. In fact, probably all faiths have it, frankly. You know, that service to the public, being more important than the money you make, or the house you have, or the status that you have, or the role or rank that you have. What's more important is actually your service to other people. And so my faith is integral to that. In terms of activism, I certainly get it from my parents. I mean, my dad was actually the first non-white member of the SNP.
Oh wow!
Joined in the 1970s, so he was a real.
You were destined to
in that sense. You know, everybody else in the South Asian community was Labour to the core, but my dad took a different tack in the SNP, so he was active in that sense. And my mum's always been really active in terms of social justice. Mum, quite famously, actually, you know, took an estate agent to court because they refused to show her a house because she was Asian. They didn't say as much, but she suspected as much in the very affluent suburbs of Newton Mearns and near Glasgow. And you know, instead of, you know, being the wee woman with a headscarf that would just take that and not question it, she decided to take them all the way to the court and eventually won it in the High Court of Appeal. So you know, she definitely is a really strong influence on me and particularly on issues of justice, which is quite useful for me in the current role that I'm in.
Yeah, absolutely. You were obviously destined for that, coming from there. Obviously, at the moment we're in the midst of a pandemic. I mean, it must be very difficult. I mean, I mean, you've talked already about faith being a strong influence in your life. How do you combine your faith? How do you marry up with that strong sense of faith in how many people are suffering at the moment? They're suffering to innocent lives. How do you marry that? Do you find hope in your faith through that, or do you wrestle with that?
No, exactly the point. I don't doubt, look, people's entire lives, however long they're on this planet, if you're a person of faith, I think there'll always come times when your faith, you know, increases. You know, there's peaks and troughs, there's waves, describe it in whichever way you want. There's definitely times in my life, you know, the 35 years that I've been alive, that my faith has been really, really strong, and at times it's been really shaken. For me, the current global pandemic, if anything, has brought me closer to my faith. Now, part of that might be because Ramadan was a month ago, and you know, you always get a bit more time to dedicate to your faith as a Muslim during Ramadan. You kind of consciously make that effort. But for me, I get more, you know, when times are tough and when times are really, really good, both those instances bring me closer to God and closer to my faith, for sure. You know, when I was over the moon and elated when I had my daughter, who's now 13 months old, I remember that being a really deeply spiritual experience. And at the same time, through bereavement You know, the first you know, almost automatic reaction is to be closer to God for me. So no, I don't find necessarily that tragedy or difficult circumstances make me question my faith. I do think there's other times where just through the humdrum of normal life, that if I don't dedicate enough time to my spirituality, then, you know, much the same as physicality. You know, if I don't, which I don't do, I'm afraid, if I don't go to the gym, if I don't run around, if I don't go to the, you know, play football, then clearly, you know, it's going to have an effect on my physical health. And it is having an effect. Luckily, you can't see my stomach from here.
That's true as all. But we're all the same.
Yeah, equally the same with spiritual health. You know, I think if you don't dedicate time to it, then you begin to really suffer as a result of
it. I kind of related to that. I mean, it must be there's so much pressure at the moment, so many things going on. How do you find that time? You just said you have a 13-month-old baby. How do you find that time to juggle family life and actually, you know, unwind and do all these things when you've got so much pressure at the moment?
Yeah, it's. I mean, not. I can't really sugarcoat it. It's very difficult. It's
yeah,
very
of course, sure it is.
It's why at the age of 35 I look like I'm 45, as opposed to 35. So it's really challenging. But I also, I mean, I love it. I mean, look, lockdown, I know, has been really, really difficult for a lot of people. I'm very much in the blessed category. I'm really blessed. I mean, I've got, you know, a nice house. I've got a garden at the back. I've got nice walks. But also for me, it gives me more time with my daughter and my daughters. I've got a stepdaughter as well, but particularly with the youngest one, because they grow up so fast. You know, it gives me more time than I ever would have had. So I try to take the good and positive out of any circumstance. In terms of the actual time, I think you just have to be very strict. I reckon as a minister, I've been a minister now for 8 years in different guises. And I think the first 5 years as a minister, I spent at burning both ends of the candle, and I had a real impact on me in terms of mental health, for sure, looking back on it now. So I've been very strict now. I've got a very good private office and good team behind me that, you know, we're very strict about guarding my time as best as we possibly can. So I guard that time. And in terms of the spiritual health, you know, as a Muslim, you know, we pray 5 times a day, and you know, I do my best to try to stick to that as much as I can, and especially the times when I'm not in the middle of work. So when I'm at work, I'll be honest, you kind of rush those prayers relatively quickly, but actually in the pre-dawn prayer, so the Fajr prayer in the morning, you know, for me that is probably the most intensely spiritual prayer that you get, and it takes 5 minutes to do the Fajr prayer, the morning prayer, the pre-dawn prayer. But that 5 minutes, if I get it done and it's done properly, then it kind of sets me up for the rest of the day.
It's amazing. Do you have a Netflix show, or is there something else that you unwind with that you can go in another way?
Of course, I watch Netflix. Who doesn't? But yeah, so when I get a bit of spare time, me and the wife we try to watch a bit of Netflix. We're actually looking for something. We just finished Money Heist. I don't know if anybody's watched that.
All right, okay, I haven't seen that yet.
Very interesting. And we've just watched a documentary called The 13th, which is about the 13th Amendment in the United States, which is about the incarceration of Black Americans in particular. So really topical. So I like to watch that and unwind. Right. But I like some more relaxing things as well. So we're watching. I think it's Canadian. It's called Schitt's Creek, which is quite funny. It's a comedy. It's a bit. It's a bit lighthearted. And my wife, for my birthday, brought me a PlayStation 4, which I've not actually used very much. I've played it, I think, 3 times in 4 months. But you know, hopefully I'll get, once we're on the other side of this pandemic, perhaps I'll get a little bit more time to unwind.
Wow. So that's interesting to think that's what you're developing your skills in FIFA or something during the pandemic.
Trying to, but not much of a
and touching on, obviously, very importantly, there's the new hate crime legislation that's coming in, and you've talked already about being committed to that Fair of Scotland, and in the past you've shared some very personal examples of being a victim of Islamophobia. Could you briefly explain to viewers who are watching what you hope this legislation will do, how you think it might help in the fight against discrimination, you know, for age, disability, race, religion, sexual orientation, the different categories that it covers?
Yeah. So look, in a nutshell,
Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid to say for me, I think we're living in a time where we see more hatred and discrimination and bigotry, particularly in the online space. I think we
Mm.
can all, if anybody's on Twitter in particular, it's a real cesspit of abuse and bigotry and racism at the best of times, let alone at the worst of times. So for me, legislation is definitely a part of it. It's not the only tool. I mean, education is always going to be supremely more helpful, I think, than legislation. But legislation does play a role. It sends a very strong message that we take hate crime extremely seriously, and there will be a punishment for that. So for me, what we're essentially doing with the hate crime bill is modernising it. So we have currently a number of protections for the protected characteristics as per the Equality Act for what we call statutory aggravators. So if somebody attacks you because of your race, then they not only get a sentence because they attacked you and assaulted you, they get an additional sentence if that is proven to be because of your race or disability or sexuality or transgender identity, etc. So that we're keeping relatively the same. The only thing we're doing adding to it is an aggravator for age, which is really important because we know how many people, particularly younger people, particularly older people, who tell us that they feel that they were abused or threatened or attacked because of their age. But so we'll bring an aggravator for age. And what we'll do on the other part of the bill is essentially there's a certain protection that exists for those that are racial minorities. Well, actually, not even minorities. Regardless of whether you're the racial minority or majority, there's a protection for you that exists. That if somebody stirs up hate against you because of your race, that's a separate offence in itself. What we're doing is we're just making sure that that is extended to religions, to, again, sexuality, sexual orientation, disability, age, as it will be if it passes disability and transgender identity. So, the bill, I think, is not without its controversy. Anything that involves hate crime will have controversy. People will accuse it of having freedom of speech issues. It'll make its way through the Parliament through the normal way, probably with a number of amendments, no doubt. But ultimately, if we get through the other side of this, we'll have a piece of legislation that, one, is modern, but two, sends a very, very clear message that hate crime will just not be tolerated in Scotland.
And do you think ultimately that will help to encourage more people to have more faith in the system and encourage more the reporting of hate crimes? Because I think there are concerns amongst minority groups that there's still quite a high level of underreporting.
I'd agree with that, yeah, and there is a high degree of underreporting still. So yeah, the short answer is yes, I'd hope it would do that. But clearly we're going to have to think about what other package of measures we can put around the bill to help encourage people to come forward and report hate crime.
I mean, you mentioned online. The online hate is a very difficult thing, I would imagine, to try to police. I've just been reading about some really strong anti-Semitic things that have been shared in the Community Security Trust have been reporting. It's a very difficult, it must be a difficult thing to police and to prosecute.
Yeah, but I've seen the same report that you're referring to, and some of the anti-Semitic imagery, abuse, threats are really vile, beyond anything. I still get shocked, which is incredible because I've seen a lot of hatred in my lifetime. That report genuinely shocked me. And what I'd say is two things. The online space, yes, you're right, a bit more difficult to police, but not impossible, and neither should it ever be. So, police are investing more and more money into what we call digital forensics, and more and more money into, that whole space. So traditional policing, which might have had, all the bobbies in the beat, and now we'll still have a number of bobbies in the beat, and we'll still continue to have officers in the street. There'll be now more investment in cybercrime and digital forensics than there would have ever been before. So that's one thing. I suppose the second thing we have to try to do is take to task some of the social media companies. I just don't think there's enough that's being done by them by any stretch of the imagination. And again, if I was to pick out Twitter as an obvious example, the amount of anonymous accounts that can just be set up to just troll people indefinitely, is to me a failure on Twitter's account to act on that.
Well, obviously it's an important challenge that needs to be looked at, how these companies can be regulated. And moving on to another issue that was really helpful. At the moment, obviously, Black Lives Matter has become a very big issue. We can't escape it. What are your thoughts on the Black Lives Matter movement? As an Asian politician yourself, you've been the victim of racism, Islamophobia. Do you have a sympathy with where the movement is coming from?
A complete sympathy and solidarity with Black Lives Matters movement. The scenes from America, again, I don't often get shocked, but how could you not be shocked by the continued police brutality by a number of police forces in America in relation to black people, not just men, but also women who've been victims of police brutality. And this is happening in 2020. You may know the Scottish Parliament held a debate on Black Lives Matters, and I chose during that debate to read out the last words of George Floyd's, and it was deeply difficult for me to do that because, you know, if nothing else, you know, as a human being, to watch somebody suffer like that in the last moments, you know, it's truly horrifying. So for me, there's a complete solidarity with the movement. I think what it does for us here in Scotland is it really forces us to have to hold up a mirror, and we have to confront the fact that we have racism here in Scotland, not just the overt stuff, which we can all, I think, call out, or the vast majority of us have no problem in saying, yep, you know, we call that out. But let's look at the institutions that we belong to. And I say this to myself as a member of the government. Let's look at the institutions we belong to, and let's question whether they're truly not just representative, but do they actively have barriers in place that prevent minorities, black people in particular, but minorities overall, progressing through those institutions and organisations. So I think it really forces us to do that, but also forces us, I'm pleased to say we're doing this, I think, forces us to confront our history. And, you know, that whole history that Scotland has had in relation to the slave trade is something I think we've not talked enough about, but now we're forced to talk about it. I'm pleased that we're actually now taking that seriously.
So I guess there are two big issues there. I mean, I would imagine when you were elected in 2007 as one of the first people on a non-white background, you probably would have a vision that the Scottish Parliament might have been more inclusive by now.
Yes.
What are the obstacles, do you think, for civic life? We're talking about the Parliament, the police, other areas. What more can be done?
So, yes, just glad I was elected in 2011, but you're right, I've been in the Parliament since 2007 as a researcher before then. And you're absolutely right. I mean, from the inception of the Parliament right through to now, on over 20 years, it's a real matter of not just regret, but I think it should be a matter of shame nationally that we've never had a single woman of colour in the Scottish Parliament. Wow. Unbelievable. In over 20 years. Wow. Of the evolution, not a single woman of colour, and that's a pretty wide berth, you know. That's black, that's Asian, you know, a South Asian, East Asian, you know, African descent, Caribbean, you know, you name it. You know, that's a pretty wide category, and over 300 MSPs in those 20 years have been elected. Jeez. So over 300 MSPs elected, and not a single woman of colour. So you know, really deeply depressing. And out of the diversity that we have had in the Scottish Parliament, we've had four members of the Scottish Parliament that have been BAME, and all four of them have been male, and all four of them have been what you might describe as Scottish Pakistani, and that's just not good enough. It all come from Glasgow and the south side of Glasgow, actually. You know, so
that's interesting.
You know, we're not even particularly diverse, you know, within ourselves. So there's a big piece of work to be done by the Parliament, but actually by political parties. And I think, to answer your question directly, I think communities are not going to settle now for kind of mealy-mouthed statements. I think they're now going to want to see real positive action. So it's incumbent on parties, including my own, absolutely, to bring forward some mechanisms for the next election that absolutely, you know, bring forward some positive action that will help us to see more minorities, particularly women, female minorities, be elected in the Scottish Parliament. If we end up in that next Holyrood Parliament with 2 or even just 3 minorities, and they all happen to be male again, there's a massive, massive failure from all of us.
Wow. You've touched on education as being important. There's a big debate on as well about, you know, how do we, you've touched on our history connection with the slave trade. That should be acknowledged as well in the curriculum. I'm also aware, coming from Black Lives Matter movement and other movements, that we should also be celebrating Black history as well, not just probably defining it to the slave trade. It's almost as if some people, when they talk about Jewish community, want to talk about the Holocaust all the time. So there is that balance, isn't there? We have to acknowledge our role, but also look at maybe some of the contributions that these different communities have made. I mean, for example, we talk about World War II. That, you know, we had 1 million Indian soldiers, the Indian Army, that played a significant role in that. And where is that in the kind of textbooks of school, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. There's a balance to strike. Learn about the unsavory parts of your history, but also when it comes to minority communities, you're absolutely right. Let's celebrate the contributions too. No, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and would you stand on the removal of the statues and the street signs? It's becoming a very big topical in Glasgow. People talking about lots of these street signs.
Yeah, do you know, it's an interesting one. I mean, look, there's some people who have a great degree of more knowledge than I do. People like Sir Jeff Palmer, for example. I'm sure will be well known to everybody here. And and he uses the phrase, I'm maybe paraphrasing slightly, but he uses the phrase, if you remove the statue, you remove the sin. And well, I get where Jeff Palmer's coming from, and I really do respect him, eminently. I think I probably disagree with that, to the extent that, there's only one reason you're given a statue. You're never given a statue because you're dishonourable, or very rarely. Statues are given to people as a great honour. They're given to people to celebrate your status. And therefore, even if there's a plaque on a statue that probably 90% of people won't read, but even if there's a plaque there that says you were a slave owner, you've still got your statue in the middle of George Square or Princes Street or wherever it may be. And that's a pretty big honour to have a statue in your name, in your home city, for example. So for me, I wonder if there's almost a hybrid solution. I wonder if we could have a slavery museum. I think that's a great idea. And whether we should take the statues down and put them in the slavery museum and almost have a graveyard of statues within. So that way the statues, they're not thrown at River Clyde. They're not disposed of or melted down, never to be seen again. But they are part of our educational history, and they're in that museum. So that's my own views, I have to say. But I'm interested in the debate.
Very interesting. And finally, I really appreciate your time today. Do you have any message that you want to leave our audience with today? You're watching.
Just a real thanks. People of faith, I think far too often in recent times, have been ridiculed. People have dismissed their opinions. And I find that deeply hurtful. And I'm sure people of faith right across, regardless of what faith group you come from, would find that deeply hurtful as well. But I want to say from the government, and I know this is the view of the First Minister, as much as it is my own view, we really, really not only value the work that faith communities are doing, but we absolutely salute you and recognise it. And we really do recognise it. It's not something that isn't talked about around the cabinet table. It's often brought up either by anecdotes from those around the cabinet table or because of some of the strategic work that we're doing with faith groups. So my real thanks. As I say, it's often the most difficult times that we see the very best of the human condition. And I think people of faith in particular have led the way in that effort.
Humza, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Great pleasure.